Hello, friends. I'm Laura Barat from laurabaratastrologer.com, and today I am discussing Jupiter transiting the houses. This is a very important transit, almost as important as Saturn. Okay, I did a video on Saturn transiting the houses as well. Jupiter is a very slow-moving planet, and it takes a year more or less to go through a sign. And it will complete a cycle in almost 12 years, okay? And the transit of Jupiter is very important because Jupiter always brings us the good things. It brings us what we want in life, mostly, okay? It opens up and expands our horizons to new opportunities, new ways of thinking, new ways of feeling, and just an all-around great benefic transit. So whatever house Jupiter is transiting is always going to be manifested, for one thing, meaning that the significations of the house, and I'm talking about the house cusp here, okay, the cusp. The significations will be manifested. They will, concrete phenomena will come into being regarding the significations of that house. And if you don't know what a house cusp is, someone actually asked me that in the comment section, but it's the boundary of the house. It's the beginning of a house. Okay. That's the cusp. Some people can use the cusps, in the middle of the house or the midpoint of the house. Some people can use them at the end of a house. I happen to use them in the beginning, okay? And that's what most people do. So, your house cusps will show up with whatever house system you're using, in the horoscope. And those house cusps are a point. It's an actual degree in a sign. And that represents, it's called the bhava, which means coming into being, the actual created thing. So this thing comes into being. It is an actual point, and a degree on the ecliptic. And that's also what involves, they're used in trigger transits when you want to predict down to the actual days, okay? Or day. So that's what I mean when I say house cusps. And if you're curious, I use Campanus, okay? There's some of the other more popular ones like Coach and Placidus fall apart when you get into the much higher latitudes. But so Campanus and Regiomontanus and Alcibiades, I believe, are the only ones that do not do that. So I use Campanus. Now, so having got that out of the way, so some people will have more than one house cusp in a sign, right? And when Jupiter transits that sign, it's going to give you things around those cusps or cusp, as the case may be. And, it's usually things that give you joy, because Jupiter rules joy that comes from wisdom, joy that comes from higher knowledge, and wisdom and higher knowledge itself. So it really is an all-around great transit wherever Jupiter is. Now, there are some houses that are more significant than others when Jupiter transits. Those are the first house, the 7th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house. Okay, I'm going to talk about those first, and then I'll talk about the other houses, because the critical houses are the most important. I mentioned in, I think, a couple of my videos when I did Mercury transiting and Saturn transiting that every time a planet transits the 12th house and the first house, that's always important, no matter what planet it is. If it's Mercury and Venus, it's more important when they go retrograde through those houses. But the outer planets, the slow-moving planets, they are always important when they transit, no matter if they're retrograde or not. Okay, So if Jupiter transiting the first house represents us. It's like a mini horoscope. It's us. It's our general personality. It's our appearance. It's our health and well-being. It's our path in life. Any planets in the natal first house or the natal seventh house are extremely important because they become part of your path in life. You will meet with experiences around this planet through your whole life. Okay? So transiting Jupiter, we become opened up to a lot more possibilities that help us become more of who we are, help us become more of our individual true selves, our unique self. Okay. That is the first house. And we can get inspired. We become more creative during this transit. We think of a lot of ways to what we want to create in our lives. And we also open up to new avenues in spirituality or religion or philosophical concepts, spiritual paths, people who may mentor us in philosophy or other types of religious or spiritual paths. Okay. We oftentimes we can get initiated into something like that, or just return to university for higher knowledge. Okay. Another thing about Jupiter is wealth and money and investing money, spending money. So when Jupiter transits the first, it usually is a time of increasing your wealth, just generally speaking. It's also, you get different ideas about how you want to spend money, how you want to save money, and how you want to invest money. And it's all centered around the theme of being creative and expressing your own true individuality. You develop a relationship with money that is more expressive of who you are naturally. Okay. And well, what is money? What is wealth? What is prosperity? I should actually say prosperity because that's what it really is. And that's having what you need when you need it. Okay. And also, it's about being able to, if you have a creative project, if you have a vision in mind, Jupiter transiting the first usually will give you the resources to manifest that vision. Okay. You will attract into your life those things that can help you, move forward in your creative endeavors for the next 12 years. And it will begin a new theme of that. Okay. So it's a wonderful transit. Really is. Now, the second critical house is the seventh house. Now, this is a little different than a lot of astrologers will tell you, because we think of Jupiter as children and, the guru or the spiritual mentor, the religious philosophical platform, which is basically the fifth and the ninth house respectively. But it's actually not that. There's, Jupiter is the Karaka of the fifth house. It is children. However, this is based on the Vargas or the divisional charts, the harmonic charts. And there are 16 of those that are most important. It's called the Shodasha Vargas. Okay. And they are mentioned by Parashara. He mentions the most important ones. He does not, and they're derivatives of houses. That's what they are. They're like taking a magnifying glass and looking at the house. You get a lot more information and nuances and details from divisional charts or Vargas. Okay. And so, Parashara doesn't mention a Varga for the fifth house, which is children, romance, spiritual practices, luck. It also has to do with creative intelligence and education, okay? Speculation. So he doesn't mention this house or this Varga for the 5th house, but he does mention one for the 7th, which is the Saptamsha, okay? And Jupiter is the planet for that Varga, and that's the 7th house. Why? Because the 7th house is conception. Okay, it's sex and conception. And what comes from conception is children. And it's also the partner, all right, the spouse of the partner. Now, when Jupiter goes through that house, transits the 7th house, it's basically a house of creating, but it's creating with another person, and the result of that creation, you know, if it's with your spouse or your partner, that's sex and then children, or it can be creations for the public. So the public sees your creations and appreciates them or notices them. Okay. The 7th house also rules the public. So when Jupiter has to do with creating, and when you create things, you want to do it with someone else, or you want it to be embraced by somebody else or the public. And Jupiter is also very much, because it's a planet of children and creations, when it's really strong in the chart, when it's in angles in the chart, when you have something called Gajakassari Yoga, which is basically Jupiter in an angle in its own sign or exalted, or from the moon, the person usually has a lot of charisma, is very attractive, is magnetic, you know, and they attract people into their lives, and they have a reputation of kind of being, you know, the type of person that people want to get to know. Okay. People want to be around. So Jupiter has that reputation. We usually think of Venus more as, you know, relationships and that kind of thing. And that's true. But he doesn't name Venus as the Karaka. It's Jupiter is the Karaka of the 7th house. Okay. Now, so when Jupiter transits the 7th, we, usually experience another very creative time. The 7th house is also a house, or your path in life. The path you're walking is the 1st and 7th house. The ascendant and the descendant. Okay? The eastern horizon and the western horizon. So, this also gives you a great opportunity to share with others your creations, your creative vision. You can have more open up to new horizons, new ideas about being with your partner, or actually attracting a partner or getting into a relationship. It's a huge relationship time when Jupiter crosses the 7th house or goes through the sign of the 7th house cusp. It's always usually a very nice, wonderful time for relationships, okay? Or getting into one if you're not in one. Also, it's a great time for business, attracting the right business partners or having an idea for business and improving upon your existing business, all of those types of things. Showing your creations to the public, okay? Putting it out there. That's also a very nice time, wonderful time, okay? Now, there's something called the reward transits, which is basically the 11th from the critical houses, and the 11th from the 7th house is the 5th, and that's your reward from Jupiter going through the 7th, and reward from, you know, being in a relationship and sex is children, okay? So when Jupiter goes through the 5th, it can produce children. That's how that works. Even though he doesn't mention the 5th house in his Varga system or his harmonic charts. Now, The other important house, the critical house for Jupiter, is the 8th house. And the 8th house has to do with, on an inner level, on an esoteric level, the 8th house is the house of bonding and trust. Okay? It is the wealth, the second from the 7th. It's the wealth of the relationship. It's your ability to trust your partner, your ability to bond with your partner, your ability to bond with other people in general. Okay? So, when it goes, and it's also, okay, the 8th house is a house of bonding and trust. And when we bond, we're devoted to somebody. It's devotion. There's an 8th house Varga, or an 8th house harmonic chart called the Vimshamsha. It's the D20 chart, or the D20 Varga. And that is an 8th house Varga. And that has to do with our spiritual life and what we are devoted to. Okay? Jupiter is the planet we want to be devoted to, because it's all the things, all of the good things. It's basically the higher knowledge, the philosophical outlook, the spiritual and religious practices, our guru, or, whatever path we're following. It's that teacher that we have, and we want to bond with those teachings. We want to churn those things over and over in our minds. That's what the Vimshamsha shows. That's what that 8th house Varga shows. It shows, is this person going to be able to trust others enough to bond with them and bond with the information they get that will uplift them? Or are they churning in their mind a lot of negative tendencies, or a lot of negative thoughts, a lot of self-defeating thoughts? Okay, that's why this Varga is part of what I call the spiritual Vargas, or the happiness Vargas. So the 8th house is really important. When Jupiter moves through there, we open up more to having a better attitude when it comes to trusting life, basically. And being able to bond with some kind of teaching, with something higher than ourselves, with a purpose. Jupiter is purpose, our life's purpose, a higher purpose. So when it goes through that 8th house, we become more interested in pursuing a higher purpose that gives us a lot of emotional fulfillment, okay? A lot of emotional security. The 8th house is a very complicated, deep house, all right? It is the deepest house in the horoscope. There's a lot going on there. When there's afflictions to the 8th house, the person has problems trusting other people, okay? It's harder for them to bond to others. So Jupiter transiting this house gives all of those things that I just mentioned. It can also give wealth in the areas of inheritance, money from the government. That can be, scholarships or grants, or, anything that you get, any wealth you get from the government. That's going to be the 8th house. It's also going to increase the wealth of your partner, okay? Because it's the second from the 7th. And it also gives a lot more, I want to say, esoteric understanding, because the 8th house is the house of psychics, astrology, hidden things, the occult, okay? It's going to give you a lot more deeper insight into psychological motivations. So, and it gives it to you in a way that is uplifting to you, uplifting to your psyche, not negative, not anything dark and that's going to make you feel bad about yourself. The 8th house is the house of psychology and therapy, psychological and emotional therapy, trying to work through your traumas and demons. That's all 8th house territory. And so when Jupiter goes through there, it really gives a lot of luck and insight and deep understanding with those types of things. So it's a great transit. Okay, it's wonderful. Now, the 9th house is not a critical house of Jupiter because the Navamsha, the D9 chart, is the chart of Dharma. Okay, it's the chart of marriage, but it's a lot more than just marriage. It's marriage in the sense of this is a path I'm following. Okay, I'm a married person. I'm devoting myself to a marriage, something outside of myself, higher than myself. But it's not the relationship. Okay, the relationship with your spouse is more the Saptamsha or the 7th house. It's not the 9th house. The 9th house is a purpose in your life, a path you're walking. Some people are married. They're a married person. Some people are single and they just want to stay single their whole life, and they want to walk that path of being a single person and enjoying themselves, being able to do whatever they want when they want to. That's also a path. Another path in life is being an ascetic and a devotee, of not getting married and just devoting your life to, spiritual practices or whatever. That is also a path in life. There's also people who devote themselves to kind of like an idea or creating something that is new in the world and, is going to help the world, something, innovative and advanced, like some type of technology or something like that. That's another path. The 9th house is a path that gives you a purpose. And that's why marriage is considered the 9th house, legal marriage, because it gives you a path. It binds you to someone else. So, and it's a choice you make. Okay. The 9th house is very much, this is the choice I make. I'm choosing to follow this path. I'm choosing to get married, or I'm choosing to stay single, or I'm choosing to devote myself to, a certain religion or whatever. That is a choice. Okay. And choices like that are made by Venus. Venus also rules marriage. Okay. So Venus is actually the Karaka or of the Navamsha. But Jupiter rules a lot of things that the 9th house rules. So when Jupiter goes through the 9th, that's also a pretty important time. You can go back to university then as well as you can when Jupiter goes through the 1st. You become a lot more interested in the future. You set goals for yourself. You feel like you have a better purpose in life. You have a very strong purpose. It can give you a lot of inspiration. Okay. You can feel very inspired, to, follow a purpose. All right. And, you can meet with a lot of higher knowledge in that transit as well. But it doesn't actually give you a choice. I'm making this choice to do this. It just kind of gives you a lot more options. It's also a transit of fortune. Parashara says the 9th house is fortune. Okay. Both the 5th and the 9th houses are houses of acquiring wealth, but not acquiring wealth in the sense of, the 2nd house, all the money you have in the bank, or the 11th house, your earnings from your career. It's wealth or prosperity in being able to follow your purpose, giving you the means to do what you want to do. Okay. And then the other critical house is the 12th house. And every planet is critical. The 12th house is the house of, or I meant to say, every planet is critical going through the 12th. Okay, the 12th house is a really important house for transits. So when you have Jupiter go through the 12th, you usually get your last wish or get something that you have been desiring for a while and you get it. Okay, it's the satisfaction of that last desire. That's the 12th house. Once you get it, you let it go. Okay, it's released out of your consciousness. You don't desire that thing anymore. So that is how the 12th manifests when Jupiter goes through that house. And it usually has to do with something that is connected to Jupiter. A lot of women can have a child. They really want a child. And they are able to have a child when Jupiter goes through that 12th house and that's their last wish. They don't obsess over it anymore. Okay. Or, you can find the right spiritual path for you that reflects who you truly are. And then you can let that desire go. Okay. Or get that last bit of prosperity that you need to do what you want to do. And that can be let go as well. Okay. So another thing about the 12th house too, if the 12th house is afflicted in the birth chart, or the 12th lord is afflicted, then when Jupiter crosses the 12th house, that indicates that something Jupiterian in the person's life will be let go because it's just causing too much stress or problems. And the person realizes this and they let it go. Okay. That's usually what it means when, if there's a very problematic 12th house. Okay. So yeah. Now going to, moving on to what I call the reward transits. I already talked about the 5th house, which is the reward transit of Jupiter transiting the 7th house. Okay. Because it's the 11th from the 7th. And then you have, the 6th house. Now, when Jupiter crosses the 6th, that's the 11th from the 8th. The reward for bonding to something greater than yourself, trusting in others, trusting in life, having new horizons in your own psychology, understanding yourself better, trying to heal yourself. That's all 8th house types of things. The reward for that will come 10 years later. Okay. When, Jupiter crosses that 6th house. And, that is usually from your commitment to those things that I just mentioned. And what that will do is the 6th house has to do with obstacles and burdens and setbacks and enemies. You'll have a much easier time with all of those things. It won't even seem like you're working. The 6th house is hard work and tedious, boring tasks. All of the things we have to do that we don't really want to do, but we have to do them to get anywhere in life. It's an Artha house. It's a wealth house. Okay. It's, the tedious work that needs to be done. And if it isn't done, we don't get anywhere. We don't move forward. It's very much a house of moving forward. In the northern hemisphere, the 6th house corresponds to the sign of Virgo. Okay. And in the northern hemisphere, Virgo is the time of the harvest. It's a lot of work, but you actually get, your survival. You get your food and, to survive through the winter. So that is, very important. One of the most important houses. It's also paying off debt. The 6th house pays your debts if it's well disposed. Jupiter going through that usually means it's a great time for getting rid of your debt and evening the score with people that you may have wronged before, or it's being a peacemaker. Benefics in the 6th house usually make a person a peacemaker. I'm talking about the natal chart right now. But when Jupiter transits through there, you're able to make peace with problems or people that really caused you problems. Okay? So that's always nice, right? And so, yeah, those are the 2 reward transits, the 5th and the 6th from the critical houses for Jupiter. Now, the rest of the houses. What Jupiter does, like I said in the beginning, just, going through the second, it's going to probably increase your wealth, as in money, valuables, any type of money, like, it could be crypto, it can be cash, it can be gold, precious gems, anything that is valuable. Jupiter going through the second will probably increase it. It will also increase your self-worth. It'll help with feeling valuable in yourself. It will also probably bring in some close friends, because the 2nd house is close friends that you consider to be family. It can also make the relationship with your family better, improve that relationship. All right. Or benefit from that, from your family or close friends. The 3rd house is, learning new skills. It's our associates, meaning coworkers, neighbors, teammates. It's also our siblings. It's, the performing arts. Okay. Or art, just art in general. Now, it's basically the skills needed to, or training and developing the skills for art, to make art. Then you have, so all of those things are very energized when Jupiter goes through the 3rd house. It gives you new opportunities in those areas of life. Your relationship with your associates usually improves. Okay. Then you have the 4th house. The 4th house is real estate, the home, the mother, our emotional happiness and contentment. It's wisdom from the past. This is a big one. Okay. The 4th house is a moksha house. It's a house of enlightenment, or a house of liberation, a house of freedom. It's a water house in Western astrology, which corresponds to the sign of Cancer. So it has to do with our emotional contentment in happiness. Okay. Our foundation. And, but it's also the past, and it's wisdom from the past. It's like reading literature from mystics and saints of the past, adepts of the past, reading those things and understanding them in a modern context. Okay, you really will be able to do that as Jupiter transits through the 4th. Okay, so we covered the 5th, we covered the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, then the 10th. Okay. The 10th is our capacity for worldly responsibility. All right. For creating value in the world that gives us more power and influence in the world. In a short word, it's the career. Okay. But some people are working in a career they really don't care about, it just pays the bills, or they're just not really inspired by it. When Jupiter goes through the 10th, you can, actually understand what your career should be based on who you naturally are, based on your creative intentions and your creative talents. You can understand more what your career path should be. Okay. But it's very much a time of, usually creating value that benefits a lot of people, not just your family, which is the second house. Okay. It's an earth house, an Artha house, a wealth house, or a material resources house. So it usually does create your material resources, and you can get a raise, you can get a promotion. You just be recognized for your hard work, or you'll be given more hard work, I should say. Recognized for hard work is the 11th house, but given more because you're capable. All right. You have new ways of approaching the work that you do in your career, or maybe deciding that you want to move into a different career. Okay. But all in all, it's a great transit for the career in general and your power and influence, worldly power and influence. All right. The 11th house is, salary, increase in salary, increase in recognition from your peers and colleagues, which is always nice, right? You can win awards. You can get a promotion. It's very similar to the 10th house. It's groups, social circles. All of those things can become better. They can become more exciting. You have, a lot of ideas about what kind of groups you want to join. More opportunities from those groups, from your social network. The 11th house is your network. So that can, expand for you. And, it's a pretty good transit. Jupiter going through wealth houses, or, the salary houses, houses of, increasing your resources. That's always nice. Okay. Those are the transits of Jupiter through the houses. I've covered them all. Now, there's Jupiter returns. Planetary returns are also very important. And I'm going to do those in a separate set of videos. They deserve their entire separate set of videos. Jupiter returns happen every 12 years. Saturn returns happen every 29 years. So, more or less. So those are very important. And I'll do those in another set. But I really want to get through all of the planets going through the houses, because, you can look at your own chart, but you can also look at your friends, or you can see when a Jupiter transit is coming up, or a Saturn transit, whatever the case may be. And you can make some good predictions about those things. Okay? So thank you for watching, and talk to you later. Bye.